Travis Wayne Goodsell. Forgot yesterday to wash my sweats. So after today's run and rash, we're washing them. The Book of Mormon, the keystone of Mormonism. Tells us at the beginning of the book, 1 Nephi, chapter 1, verse 2. It's in the learning of the Jews, language of the Egyptians. And so it is anti-Semitic to interpret it any other way. And yet, for some reason, that's too complicated for people to understand. They insist that their religious interpretation, their biased interpretation, knows better than the Jewish author who wrote it. And in the Book of Mormon's case, it means that the author of the Book of Mormon is even coming out and telling us it's in the learning of the Jews. And so you need to know the learning of the Jews before you proceed. Because if you proceed not knowing the learning of the Jews, you're going to be wrong. Any interpretation, any spiritual witness you get will be wrong. It's a basic fact. And so, for the Jews, their keystone scripture is Deuteronomy. And they expand it to the whole Torah, also called the 5 books of Moses. But Deuteronomy is their law. You know, it's the doctrine and covenants of the Jews, the law, the Book of Mormon keystone. And so, in the law, in chapter 18, which is right in the middle of the papyrus scroll, they weren't divided by chapters, they weren't divided by verses. They tell us who the Jewish Christ is. And Bruce R. McConkie does recognize this, and he backs off putting Jesus in. But I will know no better than I know now that I'm going to burn in hell for denying the Christ. A prophet, and in parentheses, he puts Christ, shall arise like unto Moses. There's a reason why he does that, and it's in the footnotes. So starting in verse 15, the Lord thy God will raise up unto thee a prophet from the midst of thee, of thy brethren, like unto me. They're speaking prophetically here. I will. That's your first clue. They're speaking of the latter days, in which a man who will fulfill the prophecies of Moses in the law will come and fulfill it. And so all of the Jewish authors of all the other books of the Jews, which include those that Christians have claimed are New Testament, use characters, protagonists, And I know Hollywood's been shut down for a long time now. You've probably forgotten about protagonist and antagonist. As you're unfamiliar with books. But every single Jewish author who writes prophecy books of Scripture uses their character to be a man like Moses. And they don't call him by his actual name. They use different names in Hebrew or Greek, or whichever culture they got assimilated into, to tell the story. And so in our modern day, there were two Jews who created Superman. Kal-El. It's the man like Moses. They're using the law to tell their version of a story and to prophesy about them. And so, when you get to 1 Nephi 19, I think it's 20. I think we can go to it. Whoops. Nope. Wrong. Damn. 1 Nephi 19:10. 10 verses off. You see that the author of the Book of Mormon, the rewritten 116 pages, knows about this. For he says, the God of our fathers who were led out of Egypt, by who? Out of bondage, and were also preserved in the wilderness by him, yea, the God of Abraham and of Isaac and of God of Jacob, yieldeth himself according to the words of the angel, as a man into the hands of wicked men. So there's one version. To be lifted up according to the words of Enoch. There's another version. And to be crucified according to the words of Nehemiah. Another version. All of these are different authors writing books about the man like Moses. And as you can see, you're supposed to do that with the Book of Mormon. That every single character in the Book of Mormon who are protagonists are telling a story in the learning of the Jews as the man like Moses. See, it's winding down. Getting loud. 6:30 in the morning. And so then when you go to the 1838 Joseph Smith history, where the footnote leads you to that Bruce R. McConkie knew to put Christ in parentheses next to prophet, is verse 40 in the second vision. Who is it that comes to Joseph Smith? Well, he says his name is Nephi, according to the Joseph Smith papers, which are the authorized version for all things Joseph Smith, not this version that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints cannot tell us the truth for, because it would shut them down. Mormons would know the truth and know that the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is a fraud and holding them in bondage. Just like the Book of Mormon just told us. Yep. That's what Joseph Smith is doing. And so, Immanuel, the sun god at noonday, comes to Joseph Smith. Says his name is Nephi, says he's a Malachi, quotes Malachi about the day that shall burn as an oven. And so this second vision, giving him a Book of Mormon and warning about the day that shall burn as an oven, is an exact same pattern match for Lehi at the beginning in his second vision, where Immanuel comes to him, gives him a book about destruction. Exact same pattern. And Lehi has a sign in the heavens conjunction, which means he's giving us a date. Right there at the beginning of the Book of Mormon, starting in verse 8. He had a dream, and in the dream he sees the heavens open, and boom, those are constellations with celestial bodies in the constellations. Those are a date. They're prophesying of future events in the learning of the Jews about the man like Moses to a certain people, and giving us the date of when he will come to them to start his ministry, to save them from bondage, if they hear him and do what he says, because they're being tricked to be held in bondage. They're being deceived. And so Joseph Smith does not refer to Deuteronomy. He's saying that this Malachi, named Nephi, who's described as Immanuel, is telling him about Old Testament prophecies, but then says Acts. Joseph Smith is trying to let you know that the New Testament is also Jewish prophecy, equal with the Old Testament. So thus the New Testament are not to be literal history. Who turned it into literal history? Constantine, with the first creed of Christianity. Stay away from verse 19 if you don't want your faith to be destroyed. And yet everybody knows that verse. And there's lots of Mormons who like to deny that verse and say, well, there are lots of good Christians. There's lots of truths that are in Christianity and we need to embrace them. Your Christ tells Joseph Smith, no, they're all wrong and abominable. Don't you believe your Christ? Because again, the two personages are described as who? The sun god at noonday, Immanuel, which comes from Isaiah, in case you were wondering. I hope you weren't wondering. Everybody should know Immanuel. We got Christmas time coming up, so there'll be Christmas songs with Amy Grant. Immanuel. I've used her often in the theme song in the description below because of that. But she's using the Christianized version of Immanuel. Naughty girl. Anti-Semite. Amy Grant. Trying to replace the Jewish Christ with Jesus. And so, yeah, this is our Christ. And it's a man, not a deity. But he's called a deity. You do not understand the ancient understanding of words that were redefined by Constantine's Christianity. That's what you need to get rid of. And so, Joseph Smith even tells us which organization he will come from. Section 103, verse 16. Look for the pattern match. Therefore, I will raise up unto my people, i.e. Mormons, of the great and abominable church in the latter days, a man who shall lead them like as Moses. For Mormons are the children of Israel and the seed of Abraham, and Mormons must needs be led out of bondage. Great and abominable church. This is where he comes from. He comes from the Mormons held in bondage by the great and abominable church to save Mormons from the great and abominable church, if and only if they listen to him. Make it 16 minutes into the video. This is scripture, guys. I'm reading scripture. You can read it along with me to make sure I'm not lying to you. You claim you study your scriptures. Prove it. And so, yes, the Book of Mormon, 3rd Nephi 20:23 has that same passage. But it's Jesus telling the Nephites, hey guys, I'm him, which means he's saying it's the latter days. No, not if it's the learning of the Jews. It's a prophecy of the future. Jesus is not Christian. He is not literal history Roman period time. And that's what you all miss. And so the date, it's Revelation chapter 12, which tells us it's from Isaiah. You look for the patterns. And so that's the date for the beginning of the latter days, when he starts his ministry to the Mormons in Utah. Judah, phonetically the same. Amazing how prophecies are so accurate. And so, we'll go over, I meant to check that, and I keep putting it off, so we're going to do it right now, waste time, hoping Google search will load quickly. Good. Go to Blue Letter Bible. Because the search is a little slow. Reformation Day with Luther. 1517. Interesting. Alright, so Deuteronomy 18. Westminster Leningrad Codex. Scroll down to 15. Interesting. It's Yahweh Eloah, not Elohim. Different Masoretic group. Okay, just my curiosity has now been satisfied. So, following Bruce R. McConkie's information, you also need to recognize that he's lying to you and deceiving you into thinking that it's a type and shadow of Jesus. So you got to be careful for that. Any Christianization, any literal historyization, you have to remove. These are now stories prophesying of the latter-day man like Moses. And the character is named Moses. It's not his full name from which he is taken from, which is David Moses. Jeremiah 23, verse 5, starting in verse 5. And even Isaiah, with Immanuel, he calls out to the house of Israel through David. That's what you're supposed to catch on to, is that this is David Moses, Immanuel. And when you know Egyptian, you know that the 18th dynasty of Egypt was transliterated into Paleo-Hebrew as the David Moseses, or the Tawu Mose dynasty. This is who the Jews are referring to for the descendant of in the future. And it's the Egyptian stories of Horus, who is the Christ symbol of the Egyptians, who is also called Son Amen. It's the Amen priesthood. So go to section 107, verses 2 to 4, about the Melchizedek priesthood and why it's called the Melchizedek priesthood. There you go. There's the name, Son Amen. And so when you hear the prophets lie and deceive you, you know why. It means they're the great and abominable church, and Mormons have been deceived. They've been tricked. So we're just going to briefly go over the Deuteronomy law chapter headings from 1 to 34, because we're already at 22 minutes. Although if I go an hour, then I can easily bathe and shave and have breakfast, which is why I do it. So, chapter 1. Moses begins. It's not Moses. Read verse 1. These be the words which Moses spake. It's an author claiming to be Moses. They're not the 5 books of Moses. They're the 5 books about Moses, except for Genesis, which is about Joseph, who is a man like Moses. Okay? So no one understand that. Do not be fooled by thinking this is literal history. They use literal history just like fiction writers do, just like Superman is about. It's about our current time on Earth. But Superman does not exist. He's dead. He died very tragically. I guess it was a car accident that paralyzed him. I'm talking about the original movie Superman, not the black and white Superman and the TV series Superman or the other. He keeps changing. He's morphing. And so Moses begins recitation of all that befell Israel during 40 years in wilderness. That's awkward, Bruce. You had more space on the 3rd line. They are commanded to go in and possess Canaan. Judges and rulers chosen to assist Moses. This requires that Mormons believe in him and want to help. I have one person who's helping and doing what he can, and so that's awesome. But the rest, you're looky-loos. You're looking for entertainment value. I don't know why I'm boring. I guess you're waiting to see if I'm going to say something shocking. The church is evil. Oh, yeah, he owned the church. Seriously? But yes, this is talking about preparing for Zion. This is what it's all about. This is how you're supposed to think about it. This is 2017 to 8 years later, 2024. That's why Passover is 8 days celebrated by the Jews. It's to symbolize the 8 years of the latter days, the time period when the Mormon will try to reach out to Mormons through a YouTube channel, or several. Israel's spies bring evil report, except for Jesus. Jesus gives a faith-promoting report. We can do it! We can do it all night long! From the water boy. Adults of Israel. It's not adults, Bruce. It's the elderly. Shall perish. Those who go to Zion will be younger, because there's going to be some events that occur during this time period that will target the elderly. I wonder what they would be. When is this date, Travis? You're keeping us in suspense. Right, I did leak it to you, didn't I? 2017 to 2024. So we all know exactly what I'm referring to here, because it happened. Prophecy has been fulfilled. And then the Amorites defeat the armies of Israel. The enemy shall come by night and destroy this valley. Section 101, starting in verse 43. Joseph Smith's prophecy of the fate of Mormons for not hearkening to their Christ. Right, Bruce? I will know no better then than I know now that all my books are lies. He did a whole Messiah series. Promised Messiah, Mortal Messiah, Millennial Messiah, all lies. Second Coming Messiah. Chapter 2. Israel presses forward to their promised land after the Amorites defeat you. That's the prophecy. You didn't go in the Exodus when the signs occurred, according to the prophecy. And so this is the Mulek scenario, also the Limhi scenario. Destruction comes and then they flee. Exodus patterns. Supposed to be looking for that in the Book of Mormon, remember? They pass over, not pass through, Bruce, lands of Esau. Who is Esau? Who? He was the one whose God did not prevail. Dumbass Nelson. He has no interest in translation. He had no interest in getting the right translation of Israel. He purposely lied and deceived you. And of Ammon in peace. but destroy Amorites. Chapter 3. Israel destroys the people of Bashan, their lands on the east of Jordan. And so, if you're understanding the geography, it's coming in from the east into the west, according to the prophecy. Unfortunately, it's the west to the east that the path is to travel through. And this suggests to us, as we now see a clearer picture, as the majority of the years of prophecies have already happened. We're in the final year, in case you're not able to do math correctly. That whatever happens here in this valley will also involve a civil war throughout the United States. 3 Nephi chapter 7. And so it's not going to be an easy exodus. There will be people wanting to murder those of us who survive and are trying to get to Zion to build it. Because you didn't go when creeping death, the lawsuit against the church occurred, and the parting of the waters for you to pass through on dry ground at the intersection to head off into the 70 to head directly east to southern Illinois, where Zion is. 19 July 1840, Joseph Smith Papers. And if you read that document, you'll know exactly why Brigham Young did not want that published. Because Joseph Smith exposes him as the leader of the great and abominable church. And so, don't get caught up on history in this. You will be deceived. And it is a little fun to know the Hebrew meanings of the words. Seer of sun, the sun seer, Reuben, Gad, armies, or is it fortune? I'm having trouble. But I can do the Paleo Hebrew version also, but it's porn. And so, continuing on, as we're at 33 minutes now, Moses sees Canaan from Pisgah, but is denied entrance there too. He counsels and strengthens Jesus. It's not Yahweh, it's Joshua, Yahashua. Gotta get the translation correct. And so, this is also interesting, because Joseph Smith started it off with the church, but did not get to see Zion. He did not get to build it. He died. He was murdered. This is a dualistic prophecy here. That it's now Moses is Joseph Smith, just like Joseph of Egypt prepares the way for Moses. Now you see the author here is putting Moses in the position of Joseph, also Joseph Smith, and now Jesus is the man like Moses who takes Mormons into the promised land. The man like Moses. So notice that shifting that's occurring here. They're prophesying about Joseph Smith. Because 2 Nephi chapter 3 explains it all. Literally. but it's not literal history. It's a contemporary author of the rewritten 116 pages. Who could that author be? Joseph Smith Sr., who was a new Israelite of Jewish Kabbalah in Vermont, and also a York Rites Freemason with a Knights Templar of the Holy Grail, the bloodline of the Christ from King David, thus the Solomon Temple, and the Egyptian gold treasure plates, and coming to America in southern Illinois in the caves where the gold plates were deposited for the restoration of Zion and New Jerusalem in the latter days. Ta-da! Moses exhorts Israel to keep the commandments and to teach them to their children and to be exemplary before all nations. And it's interesting, the 10 Commandments, which are repeated in here, or originate from here, as Exodus was a repeat. It's another author writing a more detailed version of Moses in Egypt, rescuing the people, and then having to go in a tent with a tabernacle tent because Zion is not built yet. But there's this Sabbath day thing. That's a Babylonian influence, which suggests that the authors are post-Babylon captivity. Just to help you with linguistics, if you're doing that kind of research. Like in the Book of Mormon, linguistic research says it's not an original Egyptian gold plates document. No doubt, guys, good for you, but you falsely concluded. You sort of left out some evidence of Jewish Kabbalah of the New Israelites in Vermont and the York Rites with the Knights Templar, and 9/11/1826 in Canandaigua, New York. And so the Egyptian version is the Sabbath is every day. When the sun rises, Sabbath begins. When the sun sets, Sabbath ends. Every single day for the Egyptians. And as people, yes, you work on the Sabbath. It's not a superstitious day where the seventh day of the week has to now be a day of rest, like the Babylonians created. Just so that you know. Forbidden to make graven images of Jesus or worship Jesus. And this is abominable for Christians to claim that they follow the 10 Commandments when they know they don't. The man like Moses is not Jesus, but Christians say it is, and so therefore they say that they're following the 10 Commandments of the Jews. You're not. You're worshiping another god. Islam, likewise. Allah is not the Jewish Christ, even though they have Jesus who's coming back in the second coming to destroy Christians and Mormons who claim to be Christians, and have the highest concentration of centers, Islamic centers, in this valley. Highest concentration of Islamists centers in this valley, with Jesus who's going to come and destroy us in this valley, and all Christianity and the Jews. And Joseph Smith says that this valley will be destroyed in the latter days. Anybody seeing a pattern? You're prophesying because it hasn't happened yet. But Armageddon has. And everybody's blaming Israel when Hamas did the attack. And all Islam supports Hamas. They're not coming out and condemning Hamas. The Palestinian leader is not condemning Hamas. They are supporting Hamas. They are not innocent. And yet they want to claim victims of Israel defending themselves. Israel is under threat of extinction. They cannot just let this go and say, oh, okay, we won't stop, or we will stop. We won't continue our ground invasion. No, they have to, for survival. And the world is picking their sides, and it's against Israel. That should scare you, Mormons. There will be no Jesus in Jerusalem. It's the Jewish interpretation by the Jewish author. And they give you the dates, they give you the locations when they talk about a solar eclipse. Because solar eclipses give you a date and they give you a location on Earth where they will occur. And it's not Jerusalem. We just had number 2. And where did it pass over? Pass over? Witness they had heard the voice of God, who will hear his voice in the latter days. Israel shall be scattered among all nations by worshiping Jesus. Why didn't you warn the Mormons, Bruce? Why? They shall be gathered again in the latter days. Right there, chapter 4. See, you're not supposed to take this literally. The author himself is saying, this is the pattern for the latter days. I'm giving you a prophetic story for bedtime for the latter days. But only gathered when you seek the Lord their God, their man like Moses. And then God is great. Moses tells of the covenant God made with Israel in Horeb, top of the mountains, Utah. And then the 10 Commandments are reviewed, Sabbath observances, commemorates the deliverance from Israel. God talks with man, blessings flow from obedience. Moses proclaims, the Lord our God is one Lord. Yeah, there's not 2 men like Moses's, except Joseph Smith. But he died. He didn't get in. Also, section 107, verse 91, Joseph Smith himself calls himself the man like Moses, just like in 2 Nephi chapter 3. But in 2 Nephi chapter 3, they make it very clear Joseph is a man like Moses, but he is not the Messiah of the latter days, Christ. So keep the commandments and the testimonies and the statutes, which are all just the prophecies of him. You're supposed to hearken to him. It's not bondage, like Oakes wants to tell you. The first law of God is obedience. No, it's sex. It's in Genesis. The first law from God to man is sex. It's not obedience, it's sex. But Oakes wants you to think of the temple. And even in there, it's still sex. And so, 7, Israel to destroy the 7 nations of Canaan. And notice it's not Israel, other than to defend themselves as they're trying to get to Zion, to build Zion. The United States will be in a civil war. And now that MAGA is in charge of Congress finally, with a new Speaker of the House, who's an election denier and an other abominable person, yeah, expect more chaos to come. Because November 14th is the extension shutoff date for the financing of the funding of the government. So pay attention to that. They're going to, again, threaten us with that. And then 24th, which is a Friday, that's a 9/11 Friday. And I've warned you about Islam and their special prayer on Friday, quoting from Muhammad, the man like Moses wannabe, who had extra stuff that is spoken on that day, talking about the day of judgment upon the wicked. So, pay attention. Things are set up. Just waiting for them to happen. Marriages with the enemy, unbelievers, are forbidden. Because you no longer are listening to your Christ. You're no longer interested in being a Zion people. Because the people in the world have no interest in being a Zion people. They want to do their own will. They want to pursue their own goals and pursuits. And here you see that the world, not just the United States, will be at war. The only safe place will be in Zion. And if you marry a person and bring them to Zion who have no interest in the peace, safety, and refuge of Zion, they want to do their own will, then they will result in destroying Zion. Only those who want peace, safety, and refuge can come. Nobody else. They don't want to be there. All they're going to do is destroy it for everyone else. And so they cannot come in. So don't marry them. If you're not interested in the church, go ahead and marry them. But you don't get to come to Zion because you have no interest in Zion. Israel has a mission as a holy and chosen people. Mormons, because of Joseph Smith Sr. as the master mason of the Canandaigua Lodge, where William Morgan learned of the secret to destroy America and wrote the Book of Mormon to warn us. Joseph Smith, as a York Rites Freemason that has the Knights Templar, the keeper of the Holy Grail, the bloodline, now took on the duties and responsibilities as the keeper of the Holy Grail and passed it on to Joseph Smith, who he knew he would die, but also to Hiram. The two. Both of those sons were the keepers of the Holy Grail. And Joseph Smith was only to start the church. The future Mormon would come through Hiram, thus Joseph Fielding Smith Sr. He was the keeper of the Grail, and he was turned to the dark side of the Jedi Force, or the Sith Force. Yes, learning of the Jews. And that's why I always had trouble, because as a kid, I was recognizing Christian Mormon interpretation, but I couldn't quite fit it. There was some weirdness going on that I couldn't quite resolve. And it's because it's the learning of the Jews, not learning of the Christian Mormons. Alright. And the Lord shows mercy unto those who love him and keep his commandments. Promises to remove sickness from Israel if they hearken. Sickness. Creeping death. Ooh, we are going on an hour, aren't we? And so, wandering in the wilderness for 40 years. It's not going to be 40 years, I hope. I'm already 50, 53, so I'd be 93. Dear God. Eating manna. No. Don't take it literally. Just keep it at that. And so we won't go into further detail here because we're only at chapter 8. Okay. Yeah. Other nations are driven out because of their wickedness. They're at war. We want to build a place to live in peace. And so anybody that gets in our way are an enemy to us. They're attacking us. We don't have to defend ourselves. Moses rehearses rebellion. There will be Mormons who are going to go, who have their own version of how Zion is supposed to be built, and they will think that they know better than Moses. And those Mormons can just go back to the ruins of the Salt Lake Valley and turn into pillars of salt. You have no interest in building Zion. You want your Zion. You want control to take away the agency of others and to dethrone your Christ. So you don't get to go. But that's the rebellions of the house of Israel. They don't believe them, and so they don't want to go. They're like Laman and Lemuel, etc., etc. But no Laman and Lemuel. They will be cut off, as Nephi will take only the believers to go to the land of Nephi, Zion, and build the Temple of Solomon. On 2 occasions, gone without food and water for 40 days, just like Jesus went without food and water for 40 days. And then Lucifer comes. Pattern match. And then the tables of stone, turned to stone, placed in the Ark of the Covenant. And so, yes, section 85. Verse 8, the false Christ who tries to steady the Ark of the Covenant will be destroyed. Who is that right now? Hey, Russell Marion. You dead yet? Oaks is wanting to take over. Thou shalt love and obey the Lord thy God. If Israel obeys, they shall be blessed. And so, yeah, this is still a warning that Mormons who survive and think they're going back to Missouri, they're not going to be blessed. They may think they're blessed, but the enemy will come upon them and destroy them. You need to follow your Christ. You can't just think you know better. You can't think that he's wrong and needs to be corrected, like Joseph. He couldn't get anything right. We had to change everything, even the name of the church. Even the religion. He was wrong. And so, yeah, cursings for disobedience. Consequences is what they're talking about. And, yeah, the false religions with the false gods. See, the other religions will be attacking us as well. So we have to defend ourselves. Don't eat blood. You can't drink blood unless you freeze it. That's an ancient practice or a classic practice, using the terminology for science. No more for strength of the youth standards and values. We're ripping that up and burning it. And so the Lord's going to test you to see if you're going to worship false gods, false prophets, false dreamers, false relatives or friends who are advocating for false Jesus. And so, yeah, we see the extremism that's going on, that these worshipers of false gods want to murder people to obey their God. And so defense must be used. Mormons are the children of Jehovah. And so, yeah, this is only if Mormons all rebel, don't believe, don't go. But one woman, where are you? But this is in the Book of Mormon as well. Ether, all alone. Everybody dies. Moroni, all alone. Everybody dies. That's what Joseph Smith is warning about. Listen to your cries, so he's not all alone, and you die. And so, yeah, you always got to clean your food. It's stupid to eat raw food, especially with all the poisons that are being used on our food nowadays. And so tithing, priestcraft. Section 119, it says it's by Joseph, it must be. Even though the Book of Mormon condemns priestcraft, Section 119 must be by Joseph because it says it's by Joseph. We aren't going to bother to find out who the scribe was to know that he was a Danite, framing Joseph. Nope, not going to do it. And it's not actually, because I think it's George, the son-in-law of Sidney Rigdon, which means the Danites were framing him to frame Joseph, to get back at Sidney Rigdon for a salt sermon. And so the debt's 7 years. Free from bondage of debt in the 7th year. We're in the last year? 2018, 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022, 2023, and then 2024. So, yeah, I did it wrong. I should have counted 2017. 7 years. That's what they're symbolizing here. This year, Mormons will be freed. This is the bicentennial year of the second vision, where Joseph Smith gets the Book of Mormon, Egyptian gold treasure plates, talking about the Christ, and the day that shall burn as an oven. And so the slaves are to be released also. Mormons, freed from the great and abominable church. This is it. We're just waiting. 16. Mormons shall remember the Passover. A man like Moses. It was in 2020, in case you hadn't caught on. He sued the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Creeping death appeared, and the waters were parted to pass through at the Green River turnoff to get onto the I-70 to head east. Mormons didn't believe, Mormons didn't go. And so now the 7th year, if you do your math right. And the Feast of Tabernacles. We just had that. But these are a list of the major holidays here, holy days. Passover, Feast of Unleavened Bread, Feast of Weeks, Feast of Tabernacles. But notice Tabernacles is last. And when was conference? On the first of the Feast of Tabernacles. When did Hamas attack? On the final day, the 8th day of Tabernacles. All males shall appear annually for these feasts. That's the priesthood. And judges need to judge righteously, not be bribed. Right, Supreme Court justices? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is involved with a secret combination of America, the Council for National Policy, in which Leonard Leo is a member of that council and is the one who was the go-between to hook up the billionaires with the Supreme Court justices, which means the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is in on it. 17. Don't worship a false god. Priests and judges shall be the judges. And so, yeah, the more people we have, the more the duties and responsibilities need to be, what's it called? Shared, we'll say, for lack of the actual word. As Moses, Jethro comes to him and says, hey, you know, this is overwhelming for you. There are too many people. Establish lower ranks to deal with the workload, to spread it out. And so, yeah, the more Mormons that come and join, there will be a need, because you'll need all the different areas. It's not about ruling. Obey me! No, you need doctors. And so the more people you have needing a doctor, the more you're going to need to have other doctors. And so you kind of need a command structure of a head doctor that is able to give the other doctors division of the people who need doctors. For food, you need a person in charge of food. And the more people you have, the more you need lesser divisions of labor or oversight to make sure that the food gets out, etc. And building, you know, the more people, the more workers are needed to build housing, and it's supposed to be the mountain cities of the Lord. And so it's going to be a mountain pyramid, more like a ziggurat rather than an Egyptian pyramid. That's the design that's already planned. So that's what you need to understand there. Don't have multiple wives, no polygamy. Only when there's only one man. Please don't make that happen. But women are also prophesied to be wicked too, and not want to go and turn back and become pillars of salt. So sad. Mormon women are abused by the church. And women, as a result of this abuse, either become abusers against men, not the prophets who are abusing them, other men, or they become beaten and submissive and stay in the abusive relationship, thinking that other people just don't understand him. He speaks for Jesus. He's a good man. He just, I need to be obedient. It's my fault. So study the scriptures, because they prophesy of your Christ who's right there with you. So then we can skip 18, because we already covered that. And 19 is Judgment Day, when a false accuser comes. That's how he is supposed to be punished. Also in 18, starting in verse 20, that's section 85, verse 8. And so, laws for selecting soldiers for war. That's another thing, is protecting Zion, because people are going to want to destroy it. I don't want Zionists. And then we need to establish laws to prevent murderers or hold them accountable. Equity required in dealing with wives and children under plural marriage. You just told us in 3 chapters earlier, no extra wives. But yeah, this is the alternate scenario, is that there aren't enough women. Or aren't enough men. Yeah. If there aren't enough women, oh dear God, we're all doomed. Stubborn and rebellious sons. And so yeah, because of the bondage of the church, Mormons are weaponized to be rebellious against their Christ. And so when the destruction hits Utah and survivors now go to Zion in Missouri, they're not going to listen to their Christ. They think they know better than him. They think they know the scriptures better than him. They're using Christian Mormon interpretation, so they know better than him. And the learning of the Jews, that's not true. Those Jewish authors are wrong. Got to correct them. And so yeah, they're going to be bleeps. And they're going to cause problems. And they're going to get angry. And they're going to get violent. They're going to want a coup. They're descendants of the Danites. Alright, and so lost property, wearing the proper clothes. Only Lucifer tells people to cover up and hide. We need to go free and naked. Marrying the 10 virgins. And penalties for sexual immorality, like marrying 10 virgins. But yeah, the world is going to kill each other off with war. And so if only women go to Zion and hearken to their Christ, oh dear God. You have to rebuild society. You can't have 1,000 women and 1 man and think that that 1 man can only pick 1 of the 1,000 women to start having children with, where the rest of the 999 women are out of luck. Oh, I dread that. And it would be nice if all women could get along, but I saw Big Love. I know the dangers. We're using that as the theme song in the description below, and I'm going to write it down. Big Love theme. And then you got to be clean, because otherwise diseases. And so, yeah, there are laws to make sure that people who want to destroy Zion don't destroy Zion. And it'll depend on the level of technology. Because if you have humans as the judges, there will be the potential for destruction of the government, as we are witness to. Because they can be bought and paid for, they can be biased, and they can be corrupt. And so that's why our founding fathers created a constitutional republic, so that the judges don't overthrow Amendment 14, Section 1. Oops. Roe v. Wade. Amendment 14, Section 1 states mothers have the right to their body. Women have the right to their body because they are born or naturalized and thus are citizens with equal rights. But the Christian right, led by the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, remember, Council for National Policy, put in the judges who overthrew Roe v. Wade, giving a fetus rights and privileges that the 14th Amendment, Section 1, does not give them because they're not born. The Constitution has been overthrown, and Joseph Smith warned Mormons about this. And oops, not a single Mormon defended it. Only Captain Moroni, the man like Moses. And so then other weights and measures, that's the distribution of property. It's already designed. I can tell you, we're at 113 minutes. It's obviously going to be longer than this because we're only in 25. We got to go to 34. No money in Zion. No monetary system. It's in the Book of Mormon after talking about the evils of priestcraft and defining it for us in 2nd Nephi. I think chapter 26. I have to check it, but it says you cannot have a monetary system because once you have a monetary system, you're going to have rich and poor. So you got to eliminate that so that there are no rich or poor. The resources are already on earth. We don't need to pay for them. They exist naturally. And so you just need labor. And with the technology that we have, we don't need to have human labor do it. We can have robotic labor, automatic labor, automatic machines to do all the work of the hard labor stuff so that humans don't get hurt, don't get harmed, don't get put in bondage. But yeah, if somebody wants to learn how to do it, they can. But what is designed is that everybody has an interest in what they like to do and thus share with others. And so food, we need food. So a person who likes to garden and produce food, yeah, well, you need to make some for yourself, and then all of the surplus goes to the storehouses of Zion so that others can have it. And then we got to be careful that, it's not poisoned and diseased and all that stuff. And so we're going to need to have policies and procedures in place to protect other people from those who might want to harm us with their food. And it may need to be an automated mechanical situation for that purpose, so that if you want to do food production, it would be just for yourself. But anyway, we don't know who's going to go to Zion yet. And so anything, clothing making, furnishings, all of the surplus goes to the storehouses. And then the storehouses will require a certain level of supply to meet the demand, so that when the supply dips down to a certain level, then the supply needs to be refilled. And depending on the population will depend on whether you have sub-storehouses with the chain all the way up for warehouse distribution. That's how it is. And so because you're in Zion, you don't pay tithing to get it. You don't work for it. You're already contributing. And by contributing, you get everything you need and everything you want. Because what you want is what you contribute back to Zion. So if you make quilts, yeah, you don't need the material for quilts. You want the material for quilts because you want to make quilts for yourself and for Zion. And thus the extra quilts you make go back into the warehouse. So you get the supplies from the warehouse, and then you put back in the extra blankets. It's easy breezy cover girl, or maybe it's Maybelline. And we don't need makeup. You don't need makeup, women. You're beautiful just the way you are. Don't let commercials or other peers and bullies tell you you're ugly. It's just so sad that women just think that they've got to put on a mask and alter their body because they're ashamed of who they are and how they look like. Just makes me cry. Alright, and so the first fruits. The first group in Zion are the first fruits. That's the symbolism here of the basket of first fruits of Canaan. And that's the tithing thing, is the storehouse. No priestcraft. Even he works, does what he does, and shares it with the rest of you. Israel, covenants to keep the commandments, holy people, great nation. And so pass over Jordan. The water is divided. Pass through on dry ground. Pass over on dry ground. Just like Exodus. Build an altar. Worship Jesus. Gotta obey. Whoosh. It's about sex, not obedience. Sex. S-E-X. 4-letter word. There are Mormons who believe it's 4 letters. Naughty. If Israel is obedient, they shall be blessed. And so again, the same concept. Obey and you're blessed. Disobey and you're cursed. Just be good. Try to share your talents with the rest. So yeah, if you want an education, you can get an education. It's free. And we'll need people to input lessons on every single thing that there is to learn. Because we don't have to have the public school structure. I mean, it's good because everybody in the United States are supposed to get the same education across the board, and we don't have a religion coming in demanding that we interpret the Bible literally and thus replace science. But we don't need to have the formatting of a teacher over a certain number of students to do a teaching curriculum in the same manner of quoting from a textbook, the kids memorizing the textbook and regurgitating it on tests. There are other ways to learn that are far more advanced and improved. And we need to take advantage of those. And so we don't really need teachers. We need people to teach by making lesson manuals. You know, like when you assemble a desk, you have to follow the instructions. We need people to make instructions on how to do things and make things and learn how to learn, etc., etc., etc. And so again, blessed if obedient, cursed if disobedient. And there is some stuff that we're missing because Bruce R. McConkie is hiding them from us in the chapter heading, but 1 hour, 21 minutes. And so, Mormons who got scattered are going to need to come to Zion. And so this is what chapter 30 is all about. Moses places life or death, blessings or cursings before the people. My way or the highway. And so Joseph Smith counsels the man like Moses, Immanuel, and all Israel to be strong and of good courage. Law to be read to the Mormons every 7 years. Oh, I'm reading the law in the 7th year. Prophecy fulfilled. Israel will follow false gods and corrupt themselves. See, I didn't know that. I'm just going along. And sing the song of Moses. I composed it. It's all ready to go. I was at a stake conference in West Valley. Sitting there, getting bored, got inspiration to compose a song, and wrote it out, and then did the musical piano notes. It's simple. I mean, yeah, Mozart can come along and improve it, but I did it. God speaks to heaven and earth. Israel was known in the pre-existence. Bruce is responsible because it's not pre-existence, it's pre-mortality. The premortal council in heaven, which comes from the Egyptians with the premortal council in heaven judges. And so, yeah, there is no other God. Allah and Jesus and anybody else are false gods. And so Moses, Moses blesses everybody. Levi blessed to teach the Lord's judgment and his law. Yeah, the return of barbecues. Of the lamb, it's what's for dinner. Joseph blessed above all, because he's the founder. And gather Israel in the latter days. That's the keys of Moses, not the keys of Peter, James, and John to preach the gospel. This is the gathering. Missionary work is not gathering. They tricked you. Section 107, verse 91. The key of Moses. And so the Kirtland Temple on the third day of Passover, Moses comes to Joseph in a vision, learning of the Jews. And the promised land. And Jesus takes over. And it's the book of Jesus that is mentioned in Deuteronomy, the law, where the authors of the Gospels call their man like Moses Jesus, is for this reason. This is where they get it from. And Jeremiah even says, he shall save his people. That's what they're referring to here, is Yah of salvation. They get it from the law here. And so when you go to Matthew, we'll finish up with that, because we're done. That's the law. See, Matthew, the author of Matthew, is talking about the coming forth of Jesus. It says that the genealogy, he's a literal descendant of King David. No, Joseph is. But again, Joseph and Hiram. It's supposed to be through both of them. And so, Joseph, thou son of David, as he's being told by Malachi. Angel, Malachi. It's evangelical or something like that. Evangelicon, I think, in the New Testament Greek. But it's Malachi. Thou son of David, fear not to take this woman who is pregnant with some other guy's baby, but it was immaculate, and call his name Jesus, because that's the prophecy of Isaiah, that he doesn't name Isaiah, which is the reverse of Jesus. Yah of salvation is Jesus. Salvation of Yah is Isaiah. And so he quotes from Isaiah, which is the sign in the heavens conjunction, giving us the date of when he comes, not his actual birth. But this is the name. Say, thou shalt call his name Jesus, in verse 21. But in verse 23, he leaves out sign, and says, a virgin shall be with child, and shall bring forth a son, and they shall call his name Immanuel. That's not Jesus. I'm pretty sure I know my alphabet and the construction of words that Immanuel is not Jesus. The author knows this. He's trying to explain this to you. He's telling us he's talking about a man like Moses, whose name is Immanuel. But he's using Jesus from the law, from Isaiah, which is reversed. And so, in verse 1 of chapter 2, we see that date, that star date, that he gets from Isaiah. Born in Bethlehem of Utah. Bethlehem is the house of bread. That's the star Spica in Virgo. The Bethlehem star, the house of bread star. And that's where Jupiter is born, for the sign from Revelation chapter 12, verses 1, 2, and 5. That needs to be moved to verse 3. Joseph Smith translation and the Book of Mormon, 1 Nephi chapter 1, starting in verse 8. So there you go. There's the Mormon, Immanuel, man like Moses, who will start his ministry on the 23rd of September 2017. That's the date. In Utah. In the days of the first year of the reign of King Zedekiah. Oh, it's Herod this time. It's Pharaoh with Moses. That's the antagonist. Ta-da! So, there you go. 1 hour, 30 minutes.